But the point is this, it's not a prize automatically bestowed that God has to give you because you were good. You know, you have those people who say, well, I'm a good person. I don't see, everybody's going to go to heaven. As long as you're not Hitler or Stalin. Let me tell you what, in the parlance of the scriptures, if Jesus is at one end of a continuum, over there, like 50 feet away, and we're all the way at the end of this continuum, Mother Teresa is going to be all the way down at the other 200 feet of the continuum, and Hitler will be a little bit behind her in terms of the best person who ever lived and the worst person who ever lived. We can't play that game. We can't play the game that we're good enough, because none of us is good enough. We are all tainted by sin. We're all concupiscent. Heaven is not some reward that God has to give you because you played by the rules. Heaven is something you attain because every day that you woke up, you thought of God and you tended towards God, and the Lord was your prize. And no matter what you did, yes, you sinned and you fell down, but you picked yourself up and you kept going. And your basic orientation was always towards wanting God and wanting the things of God, which is what a life of grace is about. Conversely, if all you ever did was be bent and tend towards the world and towards what the thing on this immediate earthly plane could give you, well then when you wake up dead, you'll get what you wanted. You'll get what you were tending towards. If you always just choose yourself and choose your own will and don't seek out the things of God, or even when given an opportunity, turn away, in the end, God is going to give you what you want. You don't choose him, that choice will continue unless, even at the point of death, God is merciful. God wills everyone to be saved, but he will give you what you tend towards. And that's what heaven is. Heaven is continuing in your choice. There's a great book by C.S. Lewis called The Great Divorce, and it's a little bitty booklet, and it's about a busload of people going from hell to earth. From hell to heaven. And it's incredibly written because it just kind of gives this whole idea of how the people in hell, even if they were shown heaven, they wouldn't pick it. Because that's hell, or rather the rejection of God is where they're at. And so therefore they have made themselves ill-equipped or unequipped to behold God, to even want God. Okay? So that's kind of a little bit about heaven and earth. Heaven is not for those who rest on their laurels. It's for those who are faithful even when no one is looking. It's for those who love even when it's not popular. That's why the image given at the door is one of a bottleneck. Crowding, people trying to get in, but having to divest themselves. And again, in the light of all this, it should make sense when you hear parables like those, that, for example, those of the foolish virgins. Remember, with the door being closed and being ready or not being ready. So, okay, the Pharisees, like I said before, believe that they have automatic dibs on heaven because they are sons of Abraham. And in fact, Jesus bursts their bubble because he says, I tell you, even from these rocks, God could raise up sons of Abraham. Your membership in the Abrahamic family isn't going to be your passport into heaven. Those of us today who are complacent and self-satisfied and think we are good people must really understand that nobody has reserved seats in heaven. So, salvation depends on what? Salvation depends on, first of all, of course, on prevenient grace, on God's grace given to us first. If you did Romans with us, it's that grace that jumpstarts the equation. It's God reaching out to you saying, my child. And then your response is what? Cooperation. And then obedience. That's what salvation is. It's God reaching out to you and you saying yes or no. Okay? And you can see that I've tried to articulate it very simply. you can see Ephesians 2. I don't have time to read it. Ephesians 2, verses 8 through 10, that's salvation depends on God's grace and is a free gift. And then 2 also depends, the second part of the equation, on our cooperation and our obedience. And you can see that in Philippians 2, verse 12, just amongst many passages that kind of illustrate this dynamic. Now, weeping and gnashing of teeth, what is that? That's a very graphic, Semitic way of expressing that these people are not happy. Right? Because they've been left out of the one thing they were created for, life in heaven with God forever, and a life of close fellowship with him on earth. Verse 31. Jesus shifts gears, but it kind of, it all makes sense. If you read his frame of mind and the kinds of things that he's talking about, he's talking about being prepared and being vigilant and how small things will end up big and how heaven is something that you achieve by cooperating with God's grace. And then he keeps on going. At that very hour, verse 31, some Pharisees came and said to him, "Get away from here, for Herod wants to kill you." And he said to them, "Go and tell that fox, behold, I cast out demons and perform cures today and tomorrow, and the third day I finish my course. Nevertheless, I must go on my way today and tomorrow and the day following, for it cannot be that a prophet should perish away from Jerusalem." Basically what he's saying, first of all, we don't know that Herod was looking for him to kill him. Most likely, Herod was looking for him to walk across his swimming pool, to perform a trick, to perform a miracle, to kind of be taken into custody while he examined a situation and see who is this guy. Okay? But the Pharisees are trying to probably kind of muddy the waters a little bit. Okay? Either way, you can see he doesn't think much of Herod. Right? Tell that fox. And then he's saying, tell the fox that I am performing my Jubilee mission. I am casting out those demons, but my time has not yet come. Why? Because prophets perish in Jerusalem. And, Jesus identifies a lot with the Old Testament prophets. Remember before, other times, he speaks about Abel, and he speaks about the prophets that were slain at the altar. We talked about it about 2 or 3 times ago, and how your forefathers slew those prophets. He's identifying himself because he knows that in a little while longer, he too will be the last prophet slain at the, on the altars of Jerusalem in the name of pride. And this is where he goes into the famous lament for Jerusalem. And it shows his heart. And it's so poignant. 34, "O Jerusalem, Jerusalem, killing the prophets and stoning those who are sent to you. How often would I have gathered your children together as a hen gathers her brood under her wings, and you would not. Behold, your house is forsaken. And I tell you, you will not see me until you say, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord." Okay, it's a bit cryptic, but what he's talking about is the corporate responsibility of the leaders. The leaders are the ones who slew the prophets in the 8th, 7th, 5th centuries. The leaders are the ones who are about to slay the ultimate prophet, Jesus. He's not condemning the people. He wants to gather the people like little chicks under his wing. That's his tenderness. That's the poignance of his love for his people. But he's also pronouncing a judgment. Behold, your house is forsaken. What is he referring to? In 40 years, Titus is going to roll into Jerusalem with his tanks. And it's all going to be over. 69, 70 AD, the temple is gone forever. So he knows that there is a limited time. There's about 1 generation of time, of borrowed time, in which the Jewish nation is going to be living in. But already, the presence of God is gone. And that too is straight out of scriptures. Ezekiel, Jeremiah say that in the time of the destruction of the temple with the Babylonians, the presence of the Lord had already preceded the exodus of the people. In other words, the glory of God was gone from the temple well before the temple was destroyed. And in this case, that'll be the case as well. Why? Because when Jesus dies on the cross, remember, and the curtain of the temple is ripped in two, torn in two, top to bottom, what happens? Well, for one thing, the glory of the God, it's an image that represents the fact that we now have access, unfettered access to the glory of God. But later on, during Pentecost, who falls upon the apostles? The Holy Spirit. That same Holy Spirit that used to live behind that curtain. Well, he's traveling now. Right? And he's in the hearts of each one of us through the virtue of baptism. And so it doesn't matter if they destroy the temple or not. Okay? The presence of God has preceded the Exodus. The presence of God is in each one of us. He's no longer concentrated behind the Holy of Holies. And the holy city will see Jesus one last time. And when is it that they say, blessed is he who comes? Hosanna, Hosanna. Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. When does that happen? Palm Sunday. His great triumphal entry into Jerusalem. So misunderstood by the crowd, who thought they had, what, a new king, a new leader, somebody to throw out the Romans.